I don't want to spend too much time on this for two reasons. First of all, that was enough going over it for an hour. And second of all, again, a lot of the stuff that he puts in here is old school. And I don't want to confuse you, but the ideas that are in here are still good. Now, if you think you need to go back and get the intro to SQL and connecting to MySQL, that's fine. I mean, that's what that whole class was about when we did it. All right. So you should have a good idea with MySQL how to do inserts, updates, and deletes. All right, data manipulation language stuff, and the select statement. You should also understand how to do creates and alters and drops, the data definition language stuff. That's what the class was all about. So as it says, this chapter walks through the development of a simple database for running a basic blog, and that's what it is. There are a lot of, I mean, if you don't like what he has done here, you can go out and Google, PHP blog, and there literally are hundreds, probably hundreds of thousands of sites. His is probably just as good. His is simple. I just wish, like I said, he had done a better job of being more up to date. All right. So again, there's your common SQL commands. Whether they're SQL, MySQL is just a version or a variant of SQL. So it's not my goal here to go over what an alter is, what a create is. My hope is that if you're going to do that, you'll go back and look at the textbook that you had for the class. All right? All right. One thing they do mention here is back in the days, remember the first day of class when we ran that PHP info script? Now that one line of code that we had the script that looked like this. Remember that back in day one? Well, when we ran that script, you got about 10 pages of output. And one of those pages of output, each page has got like headings in front of them. And with one of them, the output, the heading was something about MySQL. So if you go through that file, you can see the MySQL settings. All right. Okay. Now again, this is where it starts to break down when he says result equals MySQL query. And again, as I told you, in the past, this was the way of doing it. What you see right here in blue. All right, so what he has written like this So what he put up there, this is the way he did things that you see in blue right now. This is what I'm telling you is the way you should do them now. I can't be any plainer in showing the difference. Does that make sense to everyone? And again, Mike asked the question before. Yes, you will still see some sites out there that have code written like this. That's considered poor programming practice, and you should do it like this. All right? As always, if you didn't know this, and I should have told you this before, I was watching some stuff before, but as always, if you go out to php.net and you go out there, and this site used to be so good, and then they went and rewrote the site to try to make it look better, and I think they really made it worse. But if I come out here and I type in, for example, MySQL I underscore, just that, and I hit enter, it's going to show me, again, the I, Mike, you asked before, improved extension. And there's some information about it, and here are all the commands. So you notice there's a lot of them. I don't know how many. I don't feel like counting them. But as an example, that MySQL Connect, what you'll notice when you look at these, let's look at close. All right? For almost all of these, they'll show you that there's two ways of doing it. All right? And what I mean is the object-oriented way and the non-object-oriented way. And sometimes it'll have the two dots, sometimes it'll have the arrow shown for it. All right, so let's look for MySQL select DB. Unless they've changed the syntax, and maybe they have now that it's double quotes or colon colon like this instead of using the arrow, because that's the way that I've done it in the past. See that with the arrow? So that would work like this. So it would work if you did it like that, or it would work if you did it like this. Either one of those would work. All right. That's considered the object-oriented way of doing it. That's the non-object-oriented way of doing it. We're going to do a lot of this next semester. So you've been warned. All right. So he talks about connecting to MySQL, and you see how he does it. Again, the difference, I use the MySQL I connect, so I'm not going to run over that. That's the first script. You've already got my, let's just say, updated version of what he did. So that's the first script. Notice here, you're going to see this kind of thing if you do this enough. The thing that's in blue up there, warning, access denied for user, username, etc. So if you put in a wrong username or a wrong password or a wrong host, all right, you'll get a message similar to that one. Here's those extensions. So again, if you want more on it, Mike, this goes back again to what you asked. The second extension to MySQL is called MySQL I for improved. This was added in PHP 5, although it can be used with earlier versions. They all begin with MySQL I underscore. All right, or again with the double colon, or with the colon, I guess, or with the double colon, or with the arrow sign. As it says, they take advantage of some of the added features of MySQL that weren't available in the older version. All right. Then they talk next here on whatever page this is about error handling on page 340. And the author says, well, why could this stuff potentially fail? You might not be able to connect to MySQL. You might not be able to select the database. You couldn't connect because you put in a wrong username or password or a wrong connection. You couldn't select the database because you keyed it in wrong or you gave it a wrong path. You couldn't run a query because you typed in something incorrect. There were no results returned from a query. You know, select star from users where username equals, and I put in there XYZ. There probably wouldn't be a user named XYZ, so it wouldn't give me any results. All right, data not inserted into table. These are all things that could be error conditions. Here he talks about that error suppression character, that @ sign. I already mentioned it to you, and I showed it to you. So that's the second script that he goes through. Next, he talks about creating and selecting the database. So we've created the database. Now we want to be able to select it. We create it up here with a command like this. We select it down here. But again, we use the MySQL I instead of the MySQL. Then he's got his third script. So again, I ran through all these with you already. Okay? And if you say, well, you know what, I think you're wrong. I think this guy wrote the book. He knows a hell of a lot more than you do, and I'm not going to use the new one. I'm going to use the old way of doing it. I will just tell you that's considered a poor way of programming, and there's things you can't do that you can do with the MySQL I, and most of them have to do with object-oriented PHP. So he selected the database. Now he wants to be able to create the table. All right, and this is what he puts in it. We've already seen that. So again, his create table looks pretty much like what you see in the dark right here. Now that stuff, that's exactly what we did. This stuff right here. That's now both in gray and blue. Query equal create table entries. Okay? So you could literally run this script and maybe not be a power MySQL user, but just know enough to be able to create a table, etc., create a database, and run some simple queries. Could not select the database because he made a mistake here if you look up on the screen. This is on the bottom of page 349. He purposely put my blogs instead of my blog. So you can't select the database name my blogs because one doesn't exist. Next, we went in and we looked at the insert statement. All right, inserting stuff into a database. Now, notice the author says in the last chapter of the book, a different example will be developed that is also database driven. It will use cookies to restrict what users can do with the site. All right, so we will look at that, but not for a while yet. So there's his insert statement right there. That's the same insert statement that we had. Please look up on the screen here because we didn't really go over this one. So notice what we're doing. Insert into entries. The entry ID, the title, the entry, and the date entered. The values we're putting in are 0, which means you figure out the next number system. Title, and we're using our PHP variable. Since it's a string variable, it must be inside of quotes. All right, our entry itself, same thing. And our date, which is now, which gives you a date stamp, the current date and the current time. That's what we got. Look familiar? When you look here on the top of page 354, you already saw that. So now you can insert. Next he says, well, that's really not enough. You want to be able to add, or not just insert, but look at what you've done and update and delete. So he talks about secure query data, and this is what Mike had asked about before. You know, what happens if you don't put in that MySQL real escape string? And as Zach pointed out, and he was correct, that when we did that, and we had that apostrophe in there, it didn't work. All right, it was considered an erroneous situation by the system. It didn't understand what we were trying to do. So we added those that you see here on the bottom of page 359. All right. Now that we've added, now we want to be able to retrieve data. Well, a select would give us the ability to just view the data that's in there, and you again saw something like this. And you also saw that when we did this, we did an order by, all right, and we did an order by the date in descending order. Since we used now, we got the date and the time. That's why the newest one was always first. All right. And there was the query in line 18 here on page 363. And then finally, once we've done all that, we want to be able to come in and both edit and delete. And you saw this. And I said this to you, and I can't stress it with too much importance, how important it is to understand that with this edit and delete, you are working with the ID. There's a reason that ID is oftentimes used, and really is almost always used, as the name of a primary key in a database. It's so that you can jack with it. You know, an ID is just a natural thing to use to add it onto your query string. He does a really good job of explaining in these pages around 360 to the end of the chapter. So if what I said confused you, please take a read. Now, go back and read it, and if it still doesn't make sense, ask during the next class. All right, we want to be able to delete, and we put a button in there that if you click it, it does actually delete the entry. There was our query. Delete from entries where entry ID equals. And again, it's that ID. We're only able to delete one entry at a time. Could we change this? Of course we could. What if we wanted to give somebody the ability to delete all entries by a user at one time? Then we wouldn't be saying where entry ID equals, we'd be saying where user equals, as an example. So there are plenty of ways that this could be refined. Again, there's where it's accessed in error if you go to it directly. And then finally, he talked about doing updates, starting here on the bottom or top of page 372. And as mentioned, the update was very similar to what we did earlier with the delete. Of course, the query will be radically different. So what we've seen in this chapter is really a very simple example. All right? And what we're going to do in the next class is we're going to do something like this. But we're going to put a few more fields in here, and again, talk about some of the stuff that can happen. Some of it we've already seen. All right, I've already written that, but I liked his better than mine, so I'm not sure if we'll go on and do that one or not. All right, what we are going to end up doing, and I can show you this, and I'm not even going to lie to you. All right, this is something I assigned to students now, geez, probably a good 4 years ago. And one of the students who did this, his was much better than mine was. All right, you're probably thinking, yeah, it was John. Well, it wasn't John, but could have been, but it wasn't John. All right, so I want to show you this. All right, and this is going to be the demo. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the database. You may or may not remember this from the 152, 148 class, the sales order database that had customers and products. And this is what we're going to be able to do. That's our home page, customers. So we can bring up any customer we want. We can edit that customer's information and make changes. If we want to, we can delete that customer's information. Does that make sense? All right. For any customer that's in there, we can display an order. Order 1, 2, 3. There's the information. Now, we're not going to give the ability to change that order. All right, but we could do that too. The only thing that we put in here was the ability to change the customer. All right. So there's customers and there's orders. How about the details from an order? Well, how about all the details that were in 123? All right, well, notice, here's all the stuff that they ordered. And each one's on a page by itself. And then finally, print some reports. Well, how about for a customer? That's everything that William Thompson has done. All right, it's just been hard-coded right now to just give the first person in the database. All right, so it's just a query. But instead of saying select, we could have said where ID equals, and we could have done that, and we'd have the ID on here. All right, and you'll notice there's also a vendor report. There's our vendors. There are not many of them, but we can tell how many products each vendor sells. All right, we've got a product report. Okay, and just running a query on this. We'll go through all this stuff as we go in here. Here's an order report. All orders placed between 2 dates. And then finally, a state report. Okay, so we're going to run through all this stuff, and hopefully it'll make some sense to you. But we're going to do it, and it's going to be a little bit of coding, but I'm going to have you do it as a class. I'm going to ask that you at least make an attempt at this. All right, you say, well, geez, you've given us so much darn homework to begin with. Yeah, that's why I'm going to ask that you make an attempt at this. And an attempt does not mean, well, I typed in a line. All right. But I'll give you the hard copy that we're going to be working with. All right. So that's all that I had for today.